In this lesson, we'll take a look at the terminal, which, as a reminder, is just an application that allows us to issue text-based commands to our macOS operating system. It's nothing fancy. It looks just like this. It's a rectangular box with a flashing prompt, and we can run some kind of code here, like blah, 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 and then our computer will receive that code and execute it. Of course, in this case, our Mac has no idea what this gibberish is, so it responds with command not found, but when we start entering real commands, it's going to know what's going on. So of course, before we get here, I have to show you how we can actually access the terminal, so I'm going to close mine. And there's actually two ways to access this application. The first one is in your Finder window, in the Applications directory, you should find a Utilities folder. And in here, you'll find the terminal application. So what I recommend you do with this, just like with the Anaconda Navigator in the previous lesson, is clicking and holding and dragging this to your dock, wherever it is on your screen. And just this is going to allow the application to always be one click away. So I have my terminal available right here. The alternative option is to use Spotlight Search. If you've never used that before, it is a program on a Mac that allows you to find applications on your computer. You can access it by holding the Command key and pressing space. So that is the Command key plus space. It's going to bring up this input box where you can type in terminal. It should be the very first result. Press enter. That's going to launch the terminal. Now keep in mind, your aesthetic look of the terminal may be slightly different than mine. So for example, you might have a differently colored background, or a differently colored font, or maybe a different font size, and that is totally fine. This is just my custom theme and how I may or may not have customized it over the last couple years. There is no difference in the actual commands that are being executed. The terminal is as simple as it gets. So the visual look and feel, if it's different from mine, don't worry about it. What matters is the actual text commands that we are issuing to the computer. So the first thing you should notice in your terminal is this word base surrounded in parentheses before the flashing prompt. And this is actually coming from Anaconda. Base is the name of that default environment that our Anaconda installer sets up for us. And as we create new environments and navigate inside them throughout these lessons, the word in here is going to change to reflect the name of the currently active environment, whichever one we have activated, whichever one we are using. And by default, whenever we launch the terminal from this point forward, Anaconda will always start out with the base environment, with the standard one that it installed for us. You may recall from the previous lesson, we had that second screen of the installer that showed us all of the libraries that it was installing. Those are all installed in base. So Anaconda is, in theory, ready to be used. All right, let's also double check that Anaconda is properly configured by issuing that program a command, right? That's exactly what we do here in the terminal. So what I can do is talk to my program, and the Anaconda program in the terminal is actually called Conda. It's a little bit of a shortcut. So it's going to be Conda, C-O-N-D-A. And by itself, if I execute this, it's actually going to give us a bunch of documentation for the entire program. So it's going to show us all of the commands that we can execute, which is kind of a lot to take in for a beginner. So what I want to do is just issue something a little bit simpler. So if I scroll down to the bottom here, if you want to clear all the output, you can execute clear, and that's going to bring us to the top. And what we can do here is provide what's called a flag. A flag is nothing complex. It's just a setting or a configuration option that's going to clarify to the program what it is that we're trying to do. It's like a parameter or an option that we are specifying. So what I can do is not just do the Conda program by itself, but tell it that I want to get its version. And if it tells us its version, that is a good sign that it is interacting with us, which means it's properly installed. So the way that we mark a flag in the terminal is going to be with 2 dashes here. 2 dashes in a row. Sometimes it's going to be 1 dash, but in this case it's 2 dashes, and we can write out the word version. And of course, this translates exactly as it might read. Hey, Conda program, tell me about your version. What is it? For me, it's going to be 4.7.12. On your end, you might see a different number here. That is totally fine. You're obviously watching this in the future, and your version may be a little bit more up to date. All right, so let's issue one more command to close this lesson off. Let's update to the latest and greatest version of Conda. So the installer that we downloaded for Anaconda bundles together a whole bunch of different versions of Python, libraries, and Conda. So it's probable that even if you downloaded and installed the installer today, your version of Conda in the terminal may be slightly out of date. It's not going to be crazy out of date, right? But it might be a little out of date, maybe a month or two. Because the development cycles for these libraries, including Conda, are actually all over the place. And what an Anaconda distribution is just a collection of those libraries at a given moment in time. So it's possible that you downloaded the installer that was released a month ago, and since then the Conda team may have updated to another smaller version of Conda. And again, this is just a chance for us to practice issuing commands in the terminal. So what we're going to write here is Conda, which again is our application. We want to tell it to update something, and this is the command that we're also going to be using later to update specific packages in an environment. But for now, we want to tell Conda to update itself, so we can say Conda, update Conda. We're just going to update this version of the program that we're interacting with in the terminal, which we're going to see how to use in the next lesson to create our playgrounds, our environments, our sandboxes. So I'm going to press enter here to issue that command. It might take a second as it reaches out to the internet, figures out what's available, what's the latest and greatest. And you can see here for me, it's going to say Conda. The latest version is 4.8.1, and right here below I can also see with Conda it says 4.7.12 is the current version I have installed, and it's going to move it up or upgrade it or update it to 4.8.1. So again, we're following that basic rule in programming. The greater the number, the more up-to-date the version is. So you might be wondering why these other things are listed here, and the reason for that is that Conda is dependent on other programs or other packages to run, right? And what it's telling us is, hey, if you want this version of Conda, you're also going to need to upgrade the versions of its dependencies and what it needs to run. And that includes these two programs like Backports and Future. So in the next lesson, when we set up our new environment and install Pandas, you're going to see that Pandas does not exist by itself. It actually depends on other smaller libraries for its functionality. So when we ask to install Pandas, we're going to see a long list of other libraries that are also going to be installed. So don't be freaked out by this. This is just telling you all that it needs in order to update Conda to the latest version. So here, it's going to ask us whether we want to proceed with a Y or an N, a yes or a no. So I'm going to say yes with a Y. And it's going to download those packages from the internet, set them up on your computer, and now we should have the latest and greatest version of Conda. What I can do to double check is to close my terminal. So I'm going to press Command Q here to close it. Now I'm going to launch my terminal again right here. And I'm once again going to execute Conda -- version. Make sure there's a space between the end of Conda and the beginning of your first dash. And you can see now I have 4.8.1, which was the version that I just upgraded to a few seconds ago. So everything is going great. In our terminal, we are interacting with Conda. We are still in our root or base environment, the standard one. And in the very next lesson, we're going to be good to set up a new environment to set up the latest version of Pandas in and start working from there. So we're very, very close to the end. So just one more lesson to go. I will see you there. Hope everything is going great, and see you in the next lesson.